West Virginia has broken even with Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes. How is that, Couz? Well, I'm glad you asked. Pull up a chair, sit back, relax, and I'll tell you. What is up, college sports fans, Big 12 fans, and fellow members of Mountaineer Nation? This is Couz, and welcome into another edition of Couz's Corner. Pull that chair up and let me serve you up this shot of top shelf college football content. On tap in today's episode, we are talking about West Virginia getting two players from the transfer portal away from the Colorado Buffaloes. And why do you say it's breaking even with the Buffaloes? Well, for starters, former West Virginia defensive lineman Tajh Alston has transferred to Colorado and is now on Coach Prime's roster there. And then just a little over a week ago, West Virginia had gotten a commitment from wide receiver Jalen Ellis, a former Baylor receiver, and then he later flipped to the Colorado Buffaloes and decided to go play for Coach Prime and the Buffs. Well, West Virginia has now landed two players out of the transfer portal in the past week that were also looking at Colorado. The first one on that list, and I hope I don't butcher this name, Tomiwa Durojaiye. He's a defensive line transfer from the University of Kentucky. So, yes, we got a transfer from an SEC school. Durojaiye is a 6'4", 280-pound defensive lineman. He was a three-star recruit coming out of high school in Delaware and was recruited really hard by the West Virginia staff, but he ultimately chose to play for the Wildcats, and he was the number 2 player in the state of Delaware coming out of high school. Not only was he recruited by West Virginia and Kentucky, he was also recruited by Arkansas, Georgia Tech, South Carolina, Vanderbilt, Duke, Iowa, Maryland, Michigan, and Missouri, among many others. So he had a lot of Power 5 attention coming out of high school as a three-star defensive lineman. The good thing, one of the positive things about Durojaiye is one of many, and that's the fact that he has 4 years of eligibility remaining. He only played in 3 games in the 2022 season as a true freshman for Kentucky, which allowed him to save his red shirt. So he now has 4 full seasons to play if he chooses to do so in Morgantown. And he's also used up his 1 free transfer, so if he transfers again, he would have to sit out a year or get a waiver at least until he graduates, which will probably take him at least 2 to 3 more years. Now, I watched some film on this young man, and here's what I saw on the tape. Now, the tape I watched, for context, was his high school tape. I have not gotten my hands on any film or tape from his days at Kentucky. Like I said, he only played in 3 games, so there's not a whole lot out there on him, and I wasn't able to get a hold of any practice tape. But what I watched from his high school tape, he's a very big and physical kid. He has a really high motor. He never slows down on plays. He never gives up until the whistle blows. He has a really good swim technique. I like his swim technique and his ability to get by offensive linemen using that technique, and he can polish it up even more at the college level, at the Power 5 level especially. But as a high school player, he did have a really good swim move. He has really quick hands coming off the ball, so he can engage offensive linemen before they engage him, which gives him an upper hand on those offensive linemen, and also really good ball get off. I felt like he has really good ball get off and is able to get to his spot fast. Now, the one weakness I saw in his high school tape, and like I said, it's his high school tape, so take it with a grain of salt here, but his one weakness I saw was his pad level. He had a tendency to stand straight up a lot when he came off the ball. He came off the ball quickly, but he had a tendency to stand straight up, and that is a no-no for a lineman, because what that enables that offensive lineman to do is to get up underneath you and get leverage on you and push you backwards. If you're standing straight up, it's a lot easier to push you back and push you off your spot than it is if you're low and have good leverage and can maintain your base. And he did come off the ball really high a lot of times. But according to my friend Mountaineer Paul over at Mountaineer Paul Talks Football, he was able to get a hold of some film on this young man while he played at Kentucky, and he has informed me that based on what he saw, he has corrected that, and he has gotten a lot better at keeping low pad level coming off the ball. So that's a good thing, because if he's corrected that, then he could be a force to be reckoned with in the future. Now, where Colorado came into play for this defensive lineman was he actually came down. It came down to West Virginia and Colorado as his final 2 choices, and he visited both schools and took a few days, mulled over his decision, and ultimately chose the Mountaineers over the Buffaloes. Now, as of the recording of this video, I have not seen that he has actually signed his letter of intent yet or is enrolled or anything yet. So it's nothing is official until their name's on a piece of paper. But as of this moment, he is planning to come to West Virginia. But after what happened with Jalen Ellis, or him flipping to Colorado, nothing is set in stone, like I said, until they sign that dotted line and are on the roster. But it appears that's going to be the case here because, like I said, he did take some time all over his decision. He visited both schools. So I think if he was going to choose Colorado, he would have chosen Colorado. Now, the next player is another position of need that West Virginia was able to fill out of the portal, and that's E.J. Horton. E.J. Horton is a wide receiver transfer from just down the road, and he played for West Virginia's baby brother, the Marshall Thundering Herd. So he doesn't even have to leave the state of West Virginia. Now, E.J. Horton, he's a speedster. That's what you need to know about this young man. But just to go over his profile a little bit, he's 6 foot tall, 180 pounds. Like I said, he played at Marshall under Coach Charles Huff. He flipped to West Virginia after previously verbally committing to Colorado. So he basically did the exact same thing to Colorado that Jalen Ellis did to West Virginia. So they kind of just traded players here. It's ironic because both of these players have a very similar skill set. Horton played in 12 games for the Thundering Herd in 2022 as a redshirt sophomore. He caught 12 passes for 186 yards and a touchdown. The 2021 season, as a redshirt freshman, he caught 4 passes for 59 yards and also a touchdown. He appeared in a total of 6 games. Now, those numbers may not blow you away, and I understand that. But a couple things you got to keep in mind. Number one, Marshall was a run-heavy football team. They ran the ball. I think I read somewhere or heard somewhere that they ran the ball over 60% of the time. So they did not air the ball out as much as a lot of other teams. So he probably didn't get as many opportunities. But when he did get opportunities, he made the best of them. And like I mentioned early on, when I mentioned Horton, he's a speedster. He's really fast. West Virginia has been trying to go out and find a really speedy receiver that can take the top off the defense or outrun people in space, and they've got one. They thought they had it in Ellis. He didn't stick around. They've got one now in E.J. Horton. He actually ran track at Marshall, competing in the 60-meter dash. And per WestVirginiaSports.com writer Keenan Cummings, he has been timed at 4.3 in the 40-yard dash. So he does have blazing speed for that wide receiver spot for Coach Brown and the Mountaineers. Now at Marshall, Horton lined up exclusively, or almost exclusively, I should say. On the outside, he ran very few. He played very few snaps lining up in the slot. So he can compete for the starting spot on the opposite side of Devin Carter, the wide receiver transfer out of North Carolina State. I'm sure Cortez Braham, some of these other receivers will take exception to that, and they're going to want to step up and try to win that position. But, hey, competition breeds greatness, and they need competition at that wide receiver spot, and they need depth at that wide receiver spot because they lost a lot of guys to graduation and to the transfer portal after the 2022 season. With that speed, like I mentioned earlier, Horton can beat defenses over the top, or what he did at Marshall mostly, he caught the ball on little short routes and was able to outrun people. And that's what he brings to the table. He can run a little screen. You can give it to him, and he can just outrun people, or you can throw him maybe a slant route, or you can throw it to him on an out route or something like that, or a comeback route, and he can just make people miss. And what I really like the most about this kid and what really jumped off the tape to me when I watched it was his route running ability. This young man is an elite route runner. I recommend you go watch the tape that he has up. It's on YouTube from his Marshall days, some of his Marshall practice film. He is an absolute beast when it comes to route running. I mean, he will flat out make you look silly. And I really like that about this young man. And to me, that's the one thing this Mountaineer receiving corps has been missing the last few years, really ever since Neal Brown got to Morgantown, in my opinion. For as good as Bryce Ford Wheaton was, for as good as Sam James was, and some of these other guys, none of them were elite route runners. That was one of their weaknesses. They had other things they were good at, but route running was not their strengths. As a matter of fact, when you read Bryce Ford Wheaton's draft profile, that's what most analysts said his weakness was his route running. He had trouble separating from defenders. I don't think that's going to be an issue with E.J. Horton. He has had some alleged off-field issues that might raise a red flag to some, but I trust Neal Brown and his staff's judgment here. I'm sure they vetted this young man before bringing him in because Neal Brown is big on culture. He's big on having, a family atmosphere, and I'm sure he doesn't want to mess that up. Now, nobody's going to bat 1,000 here, but like I said, I'm sure he vetted this young man, and keep in mind, Marshall's offensive coordinator is former Mountaineer Clint Trickett. Now, based on his experience, it's my understanding he has 2 years of eligibility remaining. So what do I think about these two players, and do I think they are both good additions to the Mountaineer team? I do. I really like the defensive line transfer from Kentucky. I thought especially the fact he has 4 years of eligibility. So if he can't come in and contribute immediately, it's not a big deal. He gives you depth at the defensive line spot. He gives you a guy you can develop over 3 or 4 years' time, and here in 1, 2, 3 years, he could be an elite defensive lineman. He's been through 2 spring practices with Kentucky, plus he's been through a full season, plus he's been through a full offseason, all at Kentucky in the SEC, playing against SEC level competition. So he could come in ready to go day one and be ready to compete for a spot. Who knows? But either way, he's going to push the guys that are already there, and he's going to give them depth at a spot where they desperately needed it. Now, as for the receiver Horton, I would have liked West Virginia to have been able to get one of these Power 5 receivers that are in the portal. There were several of them out there. Guys like Montana Lemonius Craig from Colorado, guys like the young man from Michigan State. There's a really, really high-level receiver from UTSA. I know he's not Power 5, but nonetheless, UTSA is a really good program, and this young man is arguably the top receiver in the portal right now. I would have liked to have seen them get one of those guys, yes, but I think West Virginia was looking more or less at speed here. And I'm not sure any of those guys would have given them the type of speed that Horton's going to give them. So I think they were looking at specific, not only positions, but specific receiver positions. Is he an X receiver? Is he a Y receiver? Is he a Z receiver? Does he play in the slot? Does he play the outside? Does he play the right? Does he play the left? I think they were looking more specifics than just, hey, we need a receiver. They've got a big body guy on the outside in Devin Carter who can use his body to create space. They've got a small, quick twitch guy that can play the slot in Jashawn Polk out of the portal. Now they go and get a guy in Horton who can play either position, but mainly plays the outside, but is more of a burner. Whereas Devin Carter, like I said, uses his body. This guy is a burner. So he can burn you deep, or you can throw it to him short, like I said, and he can make people miss with his speed and outrun you to the end zone. So I do like that aspect of his game. It just, it's not as pretty on paper to see a guy from Marshall as it is to see somebody from a school like Mississippi State, Cal, BYU, Colorado. And by the way, the reason I mention these schools, because these are the other schools that were after this young man in the portal. So there were other Power 5 schools interested in this young man from Marshall, which shows that he is a talented player. And like I said, I do like his speed and route running ability, and he feels a need for the Mountaineers and Coach Brown and wide receiver coach Bilal Marshall and offensive coordinator Chad Scott. So let me know in the comment section, Couz's Corner family, what do you think about these 2 additions? Do you like the additions of E.J. Horton? And do you like the addition of Tomiwa Durojaiye? And like I said, I hope I didn't butcher his last name, but I want to hear your thoughts on both of these young men. Do you have an issue with the fact that Horton was not a Power 5 player? And do you have an issue with the fact he was at Marshall? You can support me here on the channel by going to BlueRidgeCoffeeCrafters.com. There's a link in the description box. Order you a bag of delicious, smooth coffee. This coffee is made with hand-picked coffee beans. It's less acidic. It's less bitter. Very, very good coffee. Go check it out. Type Couz's, COUZ' in the comments at checkout to let them know you heard about it right here on the channel. And by the way, before you do that, guys, you might want to check out this video right here where I talk about the wide receiver West Virginia thought they were going to land in Jalen Ellis before he decided to flip to Colorado. That video can be found right here. So check it out. Now, Q Country Roads.